Yeah. So, firstly, thanks to the audience for staying on. Been a long day, and we're of course happy to have with us Mr. Arun Kedia from VAV Life Sciences, and they're also the sponsors. And also wonderful talks by each of our speakers. Professor Mahesh, Head of Chemical Engineering Department, and also we've had Dr. Yogeshwar Vachav, who also gave a wonderful talk today. And we're fortunate to have them for our panel discussion. And I hope that we have questions, not just the ones I ask, but also from the audience. So starting out, I um, want to put for one question, which basically, I mean, we've seen lipids as drug carriers, and I mean, for a long time, maybe almost 50 years, and yet we see a very small number of uh, products out in this field. So, what are the obstacles? What are the challenges that are being faced by the industry in this regard? So, this question maybe we can start with Mr. Kedia, and then we can go around.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So it's actually a good question to start with. Quite often we have also this discussion internally or with customers. So the major challenge is, that lipids are multi-dimensional. There is complexity on the lipids, on the manufacturing processes, on the analytical sciences, long-term stability, and then they are also multifunctional, which means across routes of administration. So in the end, my impression is, and I come from outside the pharma industry. I'm a chemical engineer by education. So my impression was that the pharma industry used to think very linearly. So for one indication, you have one blue pill. One for another indication, you have another pill, or for something else, you have an injection. Uh, a copy of a product, which means you just put in the same molecule. So paracetamol 500 mg, you'll be surprised, 614 brands in India. And I mean, as an outsider, I was always wondering that maybe 10 brands need to exist and the rest need to vanish. So the major challenge with lipids is that it's multidimensional. It means huge number of opportunities, but also equal number of challenges for people who cannot appreciate this multidimensional role. And then, of course, if something is multidimensional, it needs that much more efforts to understand the topic. That's my view.
Okay, so I'll add to what Mr. Kiddy has said. From industry point of view, because I am the end user, of course, you as a supplier would like to sell, me as a client, I need to buy. But then the question may have different responses if I'm talking from the drug discovery point of view or maybe complex generics, because these are two different segments. When I say drug discovery, when we start phase one studies coming from the preclinical, the first answer drug discovery company would like to get whether my drug is showing the desired safety. Can I determine the maximum acceptable dose? So, a toxicologist or clinician would like to see, can you formulate suspension or just drug in capsule? As a CMC person or formulation scientist, if I know my drug is very poorly soluble, no matter how much I'm going to put into the suspension or capsule, which is not going to be absorbed, how we are going to see the effect, then we need some complex formulation. In our words, it's complex. For them, it's a super complex because they just want to see the effect due to the drug, not to any excipients. And when they agree for the formulations, then we come with the battery of the formulations: nano suspension, solid dispersion, mesoporous silica particles, and lipids. When we say lipids, again, you have a large battery of the formulations we discussed: mixed micelle, liposomes, MIDs. Then, of course, you need specialized CDMOs because not many mid-sized or small companies can do in-house. and very specialized know-how is needed. Cost of goods is one thing they always try to consider, because then you need to source the excipients. Then, of course, the specifications of the excipients, whether they are meeting the regulatory compliance. If my drug is sensitive to any degradation, because ultimately drug will be dissolved into the lipid, it will remain in the solubilized state. Drug in a solid state may be stable, it may not be stable into the solubilized state. In that case, maybe then choice of formulation may vary. So all these factors do drive the choice of the formulation for the early clinical studies. Maybe when we move to phase 2 or phase 3, because phase 3 is then most likely your final commercial formulation, there I have huge scope to decide, okay, maybe this is the formulation I need. If none of the tested formulation was able to show the desired efficacy, maybe then I can go for liposomal formulation. Maybe I can go for mixed micelles. For example, cyclosporine, you have the sanimune, which is a lipid-based formulation. Then I have a choice. This is all about drug discovery. For complex generics, I mean, like if innovator had a liposomal formulation, generic player had no choice. He has to develop the lipid-based formulation, then that will be driving his choice. If it is a 5-5B2 approach, which is one of the regulatory pathways a lot of development companies are using, maybe the existing formulation is in typical solution like your paclitaxel cream for ear. Maybe there I have a scope. I may come with some lipid-based formulation with good solubilization potential, with the same efficacy, and I have a chance to get maybe better patent protection, and that can also help to justify to the management, to the authorities, look, using these formulations, I can come with the more safe formulations. So these are all aspects we need to take into account from the industry point of view when we go for choice of lipid-based formulations.
I'm an academician, so but my
You also see complexity. Right?
so of course there's a lot of complexity, but my understanding, and again as an academician, has been that maybe it is a cost. The example that I can think of, and we've been looking at medicines for anemia. Ferrous sulfate is the most basic one. With the ascorbic acid, you get these tablets, and they're very cheap. But then, if you were to look for liposomal delivery with the iron in it, they are much more expensive. And so, given the way the market is in India, my guess would have been that while you can overcome the complexity and do that in India, maybe the price is very sensitive. It's a price sensitive market, as I say. So this is my very
Okay, you raised an interesting point, so I am tempted to respond. So we have developed the liposomal vitamin C, and I will make two examples where the bioavailability increases 43x. If you do the final maths on an Excel sheet, finally it turns out to be cheaper because if you reduce the drug cost. But imagine an oncology drug which is 15 crore rupees a kilo, and if you reduced or if you increased bioavailability 80x. So sometimes the paradoxical question is that can you afford not to adopt these technologies? I mean, if you see the marketplace, easily cancer drugs can run at 5 lakh rupees a dose. If you are able to bring it to 400 rupees a dose because of the bioavailability change, so it's an interesting opportunity. But that's on the cost because it's a common fallacy that lipidic nanotechnology will end up being more expensive just because the lipids seem to be more expensive.
I think process is also adding to the overall cost, of course, because then not imagine if you are developing a simple solution, then you just have a simple mixing. In this case, naturally, you have to go with a high pressure homogenization, and these steps are also adding. Then, as these are complex formulations, again, you have the specialized analytical techniques to be investigated. Your specifications are also important. What is the particle size specifications you are adding to the COS? And I mean, I'm not saying this is not doable, but then often question is always asked when you have two choices, which one you will go for. And then these are the factors you need to take into account.
Thanks. Now, of course, there's a lot of interest in lipid nanoparticles over, say, liposomal drug delivery. So, how do you see this over the next few years in terms of lipid nanoparticles versus liposomes in the delivery platform? So maybe Professor Mahesh can start.
You should go ahead.
Uh-huh.
Really, I will not be able to answer this question.
So in general, of course, we see the sector galloping. It's regardless of the nature of the nanoparticles, so is it liposomes, micelles, cochleates, dendrimers, whatever. And we support, of course, all kinds of nanoparticles, even those where our products may not be directly being used. But the sector is galloping, and I mean the long-term reasons are crystal clear. We have an internal joke one of my colleagues had made that 10 years later we will be wondering how the pharma industry was working now. ऐसे ही ड्रग बॉडी में लेते थे, ऐसे ही छोड़ देते, किधर जाना था उसको मालूम नहीं, किधर टॉक्सिसिटी कर रहा है, किधर डैमेज कर रहा है, किधर एक्शन चाहिए, कोई को मालूम नहीं है. So it is almost like bull in a china shop. Now this is of course a futuristic scientific joke, but the point is that we will all move to targeted delivery, where the action, where it is required, only the drug will reach there and there alone, and it could be at a cellular level. So we see this industry being transformed, and of course products or drugs where it is already adopted, the earlier versions have become obsolete, like dinosaurs.
I have this question related to regulation. How, I mean, in today's talks, it came across that even the regulations are not in place related to these new technologies. So, how has your experience been in terms of, are these sort of causing delays in terms of approvals or?
Yes, I mean not delays, but of course you need to be very sure what are the regulatory requirements. I think that was one of my question again, because this, as the gentleman said, it is a gray area. Because even FDA, you see overall interaction, all the regulatory guidance is the moment you start talking about nano range, then question always comes up at the end of the day where these nanoparticles are going. As I said, that what is the dispositions, whether they are getting deposited in the deep tissues, are they being cleared? So this particle size again remains quite specific. The easiest way as a sponsor submitting the dossier, I can stick to what others have done. Because imagine there is any other company has developed any nano formulation with 350 nanometer. I'm just giving an example. Then maybe it helps me to justify that so and so product has been submitted with such a particle size. Maybe there is literature based evidence, and this data I can always use to justify. But if I'm really going to very specific for which there is no existence, then it becomes my responsibility to prove to the authorities what is the end fate of my product. And this is something quite complex, and I'm talking from a maybe small size or mid size pharma company's point of view, because then we do not have that kind of resources or knowledge how to put in place those studies, how to come with that data that authorities will be happy. And this answers your question related to delay. And that is one thing. Second thing, again, in terms of all the paperwork we need to submit, because the moment we are getting into the lipid formulation, naturally there are more than one excipients, and these are, I mean, several lipids, surfactants. Then there's standard requirement in terms of the specifications and what are residual oxidizing impurities. This should be within specifications. Final product may have some specification with respect to the particle size, D90, D50, D10, PDI, and this is something you have to really make sure that this is reproducible, especially moving from lab scale to the commercial batch scale. And these are all regulatory expectation they will have from the CMC, what it means chemistry manufacturing control, and other is more from the safety point of view. And this is where we should be ready.
Dr. Kedia, about your experience in because as someone who's manufacturing, you would come across your clients mentioning what kind of issues they are facing in terms of regulatory aspects.
So what we directly faced and we've seen over the years that in the beginning the regulators had no clue how to define water lipids, and we've had sort of very amusing discussions. So okay, the lipid should be pure. So I would ask, okay, is your blood pure? So these are not single component materials. So what does it define purity? Okay, it must have certain something minimum. So okay, then can we put a lower limit to platelet count? So these kind of discussions, what we have been doing as a company is we've been very actively contributing to the monographs of the lipid. Some of them have been published, some of them are open to comments, and that's obviously also a long bureaucratic process. So that part we face directly. Now, actually, Dr. Yogeshwar has given quite a comprehensive answer. So just one or two things to add, that even the regulators are struggling to understand this space. This is sort of something very alien which came from the sky. From 100 years of pharmaceutical science and how regulation has developed, this is something which is uncontrollable. So, if you imagine a normal tablet of a normal API, who cares whether it is 200 and 250 nanometers and what does it do in the body? So they are struggling to understand. Now they are, I think, also understanding the significance of trying to understand. So earlier I have also seen pre-COVID particularly that they would try to sweep it under the carpet. I'm sure you will agree. कि उतना मेहनत ही नहीं करना है to understand. But of course, COVID changed a lot, I would say, positively for the lipid sciences. And now they are trying to trying to make guidelines. They are likely to make mistakes, but at least the process is begun.
Thanks. So this question is for Professor Mahesh because because I know that we have kind of similar time we joined, and there was a time when the faculty generation before us, they were very involved with industry in terms of technology. Then came a period where engineering sciences or even pharmaceutical sciences sort of took the front seat, and now again we see this push towards applied science and technology. So do you see that effect when you look at the research of faculty within the department and even throughout the country?
Yeah. So it's very much there. And as you rightly pointed out, I think when we had joined, I joined in 2003 and which is joined 2004, 5 and maybe just around that time. So 20 years kind of, more than 2 decades. At that time, a faculty member, what was expected is that publish in the very best journals, produce great PhD students who have done good research, very fundamental, and that's what was expected. Maybe that was true even 5 years back, 5-7 years back. But what has changed in the last 5 to 7 years is that they say, well, it's okay, you may be publishing, but now we want to see you translate that research. At least a section of the faculty are now required to translate that research. So what it means is that earlier when DST would give a grant, they would ask, okay, where have you published? Have you published well in good journals? And if it was, then they were very happy and they would give a grade and so on and so forth. But now they said, okay, you're published, but what do you have a product at the end? Do you have a process? Have you licensed it? Have you talked to a company? So these are the 4 or 5 things. And very often we get a phone call or an email from the program director saying that there is a parliament question tomorrow. Please send us blah 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 blah. And in all of those, whatever needs to be sent is not publications. They want to know whether a product is out or a process is out. So that has literally changed everything. So when we joined, I don't think anyone had a company in our department. But now at least there are 8 to 10 startups that have come up from our company. So it's really changed. So government, so the latest funding that came up from the ANRF or the old DST requires for all proposals that they will entertain, and these are significant amount of money. They are giving 2 crores upwards, 1 to 2 crores upwards. But they want to see only those technologies which are TRL3 and above. That is, you already proved something in the lab as a proof of concept, and then taken further. And then when you write the proposal, you have to say which company are you going to be collaborating with, and what is your commercialization plan. So that's how things have turned around in the last maybe 5 years, 7 years is what I'm seeing. And there's a lot of money from the government. There is tons of money that is coming in. ICMR is putting in a lot of money. DST is putting in a lot of money. DBT is putting in a lot of money. Bill Gates Foundation has just teamed up with both ICMR and ANRF for medical devices, but I think for pharma also they're coming up. So it is a total transformation. And so I think at least it's a good scene to be in, good part.
So I do have a lot of questions, but I think we should open it to the audience, and if there are any questions for our panel members or any comments from your side, welcome for that.
So maybe I'll just add up to what we just said. With some of the best scientists that I have seen in the field of pharmaceutical sciences, they come from chemical engineering. So I was just wondering why Indian chemical engineers, they never look towards the pharmaceutical sciences, developing products or something like that. And whatever you said, everything turned around because government started showing the interest. Why are the research scientists, they never turned out towards the sciences at India?
Yeah, very good question. I can tell you from my personal example. So when we were working on this very thing that I just presented in the morning, this was around 10 years back. So I'm talking about 2012. Believe it or not, whatever we may say about Government of India, Babus or whatever you may call them, actually many of them, at least the ones I have interacted, are very particular that the money that has come in from the government should end up as commercialized product or whatever. So he took me, and I will not name that company, around 2012 or 13, where he took me, asked me to make a presentation. I said, here is a process, why don't you try it and all of that. And they were making liposomal product at that time, 2013, 14. But nothing came out of that, right? And I think what has changed is not just government capital, there's a lot of private capital that has come in. So a lot of, you'll see VCs and all looking for deep tech, actually investing in these companies and so on. And I think there is now money in the system, and they can see that innovations that come out will lead to money and further. I mean, new money. So finally, deep tech and then leading to many technologies. They see that. And I think that is what has changed. It is not that talent was not there 10, 15 years back. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I also do not understand as to why many chemical engineers are not there in the pharma industry, because at least for the processes, not for drug discovery, but for the processing part, there should be chemical engineers. And I was just telling Sukedia that in one of these very big companies, my classmate, chemical engineer, she joined maybe 10 or 12 years back, 15 years back. And she was very surprised to find that even basic balances of, material balance and all of that was not done and so on. And I think chemical engineers should play a very important role, especially in the processes side. So that's what I think. You want to add with the chemical engineer?
No, absolutely. I have seen the pharma industry transform, and it was sort of very dominated by chemists. So, I first saw that, I was also equally surprised or shocked, or it's also amusing. But also connecting to your previous comment, there is a lot of money floating around, so it's excellent time for startups also. So if there are PhD students, don't think that the end of your thesis defense is the end of your academic career. Continue that. Try to find an ecosystem which will support you. And finally, the objective of any good research is to be able to reach the masses. I mean, if you've made a new product or a new technology or something transformative, the larger society should benefit from it. Today, the ecosystem to support it is surely there.
Anyone else? Any questions?
The question I have is, so we face a lot of problem when we try to approach companies and all, and it doesn't seem to go anywhere. There are back and forth interactions with them, but doesn't materialize. It's very difficult. You make 15 attempts and then maybe one hit you get. What's the so my basic question maybe with Mahesh and the other both of you also is, what do you feel? What is your expectation from academia? And Mahesh, maybe you can elaborate what is your expectation from industry if you were to have a good collaboration. It's not happening all said and done.
Okay, but can you
So,
give an example of what kind of topics you take to industry and then what kind of difficulties you face? And
for
I'll be
example,
able to give a better answer.
yeah, it's very sector specific. Often it's very sector specific. There's no doubt about it. But what we have realized is, for example, we work in something which where we've kind of suggested some designs of fabrication. Now, these will be around 10 CR type of completely new technology. But there's great reluctance in the Indian industry to attempt it or to co-develop a technology. Now, development takes. So what we've seen is the industry in India, especially in the chemical engineering sector, is very happy licensing out technology from big players and using it and pay huge license fees instead of developing own technologies, which requires dedicated effort both in terms of time and money. And you just have to have the trust. And I am very sure about the colleagues I have in my department. I am sure if a proper project is entrusted upon them, they'll deliver. May not be in 1 year or 2 years, maybe in 4 or 5 years. But you will have a homegrown technology which you own. The fallouts of that are enormous, right? And so what we've seen with industries, they live with the problem. And we have a very reputed industry, and my colleague, a senior colleague of mine, told that they approached them in 2000, and then our guys told them a solution, and they didn't want to sponsor. They came back with the same problem in 2015. So you live with these problems for 15 years, but you don't want to spend money when somebody is trying to give you a solution. Mahesh and I have a similar example with a company around our campus, multinational, which keeps coming after every 5 years with the same problem. But when you discuss the problem, you ask them for money, they are reluctant. So we are very confused about this whole approach of Indian industry to shell out money to develop something in the long run. It can't be problems of troubleshooting kind. We are, as academia, we want to invest in something which challenges us, right? That's what our grievance.
Yeah. So I am tempted to make a longish answer. One aspect is absolutely true that sort of we have come out of this slave mentality. So the white technology, the Goremanka technology. I've seen an era when industrialists would proudly put a board on their chest, foreign technology. The good news is that we are coming out of it. But this, what you then described, I'll tell you there are three aspects to it. Maybe you are approaching the wrong kind of companies, and I want to explain that. When we talk about large companies or multinationals, and I will not name companies, but you can easily picture very large publicly listed companies tend to have lawyers and accountants and Excel operators on their board. There will be an LIC nominee, and you will be surprised. I mean, again, you just do this exercise that look up any large listed company. I don't want to name any companies, and look at the board composition. So they don't have the either they don't have the original founder on the board no longer, or he is in minority, she is in minority. You will have a lot of. So my suggestion would be look for small and medium companies which have still the founders or the owners on board. They will connect better, and there has to be a little bit more exercise on finding the relevant company. What happens? These large companies have a lot of visibility. So if I say XYZ large company, the academic circle also gets very excited. If I ask students where would you like to be placed, they will immediately name those famous I would say TV or newspaper companies rather than look for a relevance. But in general, your comment is correct. We have this mentality where we are not innovators, and we are just coming out. So I mean, if you look at our company, and I don't want to count on this, but That's still 94% of our sale is from outside India. We joke internally that in India our next door neighbor doesn't know us. Why is that? Are lipids not relevant to India? Are new technologies? But we have also seen a lot of resistance with the large Indian companies to adopt these technologies. And some of these are not even as Dr. Yogeshwar will say, that if you are copying a generic, so where is the brain also? You know, you have to just copy diligently. He's running the Xerox and checking the Xerox, right? Yeah. So. But yeah, I'm interested to know the academic view on this.
Yeah, so so as Rochish pointed out, I think one place where I see a difference is the kind of problems that academia is good at is which requires in-depth understanding of a problem and it will take time to solve. I think the industry feels that academia is too slow; they can't keep up with the industry. And so, if we give them a problem, they will go into a shell, and then probably will not get an answer. Um, and so, what happens is, as was pointed out, is if there are some problems in the industry, and they feel that it can't be solved, they just continue with the problem. And I think that's where a change of mindset is required as to what is academia capable of. We are not capable of solving, in very few cases, but in most cases, we can't solve an immediate problem because that is not really something in the process, unless someone has worked on that process. But something which is kind of more fundamental, a breakthrough kind of a thing, but that requires patience on both sides, both from the side of academia, because we keep working on many problems, but then the academia or the faculty members should be ready to invest the next 3 to 4 years working on that problem, meet their counterparts in the industry on a regular basis. And similarly, the industry also has to realize that a faculty member is actually spending time on a particular problem. He or she has the option to look at some other problem, but because of this collaboration, he or she is looking at this problem, spending his or her time, and that also requires a PhD student to be working consumables, all of those things. So I think once that understanding comes, I think it goes well. I have personally worked with an international pharma company for over 4 to 5 years, and there it was very clear that they are looking at a PhD student working on a long-term problem which was ailing them, and that went off fine. But in cases where the company is looking for an immediate thing, can you solve in the next 3 months, 6 months? Unfortunately, academia is not geared for that. This is my personal opinion.
So, Mahesh, on that count, how has this industry-defined problems taken up by master students for the short term?
Right.
How has the response been?
So there is this course that now we run in chemical engineering department, and it is anchored by Professor Sanjay Mahajani. And what he has done is he runs this course called Industry-Defined Problems. It's a full semester course, and it has about 20 students, 2 students per group. So there are 10 groups. And then he sends out an email to the Indian chemical industry and says that, look, do you have any problems that needs immediate attention and so on? We have these students who will sit with you twice a week over 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever, and give them the problem. They will come back next week and you'll have meetings and so on. And amazingly, they have done well, because those are the kind of things that kind of can be, you can make quick progress because they are not big problems. They are like process problems. I'm not getting my pressure drop across the pump. There's something, there's a sizing wrong. Can someone do this calculation? All the filtration and cost. So more than 100 companies have actually benefited from that. So there is that too. But what I had in mind when I was talking about is a little long-term kind of problem. But this is something that we have initiated in 3, 4 years, 5 years now. It's been very successful now. And some of these, so there is also this confidence that an industry has to get about academia or department. Once they see that the students guided by the faculty, and by the way, it's free of cost. So the industry doesn't pay a single rupee for this. And the faculty is guiding the students. And many industries, once they see a benefit, then they come back to the faculty and say, can you do consultancy for us? Can you help us with the long-term problem? So maybe there is this confidence issue also, and maybe this is a good way. So that's what we department. So this is a nice way to start off. No strings attached for the industry. Come, give your problem. We and our students will solve, and then let's see how it goes. So that's what.
So I have a question, firstly to Dr. Yogeshwar, in terms of your career in industry. What kind of training is industry looking for when they're hiring graduates, or how do the graduates prepare themselves to be ready for industry? Because always we tend to hear this, that students are not ready to join industry. So what kind of skill sets are you using? And maybe after that to Dr. KD.
I mean, when I talk about pharma, just to give an example, if I have to hire someone to develop formulations, the minimum expectation I will have, the student, he or she should have very good basic understandings of the latest technologies. What are the basic principles involved? What are, let's say, hiccups? How troubleshooting can be, performed in those regards. One of the important aspect is also documentation, because maybe, I mean, we have all gone through that process where we do thesis. Maybe we are not quite used to write things in a proper way. In industry, it's totally different ball game. So that expectation will be also there. How precisely you can really summarize the experiments, the overall outcome, follow all the SOPs, and then of course,
I mean, just to sort of put in context, like for example, there would be a graduate student and they would not have experience in research methodology versus someone, a postgraduate student.
right.
So what level would you take a graduate student in the technical
Sure.
line?
So when it comes to the research,
Mhm.
minimum expectations will be either a master's thesis or PhD thesis. If it is a bachelor's degree, then of course, typically for pharma productions, or maybe for typical QC testing, say like microbial analysis, HPLC analysis, there the bachelor students can fit together. So their expectations are not quite high in terms of the proactive thinking or the basic concepts. To be honest, I mean, how to deal with the problems, but the minimum expectations that given a process, whether the student is able to execute and put the results together, that will be the evaluation.
Okay. Dr.
Yeah,
KD.
I've been actually largely satisfied with the academic skills. Of course, it depends on the quality of this institution.
Mhm.
But frankly, I've been very largely satisfied with the academic skills. One comment I would like to make, though, if I compare students in India and internationally, then Indian students tend to lack a little bit writing skills. So maybe it's also
Mhm.
related to your comment. So writing reports, or I mean, this is something, but I don't know if it's something which academics can change, or it's in the Indian ecosystem. But then this is certainly an observation.
One thing I'd like to add, maybe again it's our mindset, because I've interviewed both students from India as well as Europe. In Europe, I've seen the students are quite honest. If you ask something, they're very specific. Have you done that? They'll say, no, I've not done that. Here, often answer is yes, I know that. But then the problem really starts when they join in, your expectations are high. So there, I mean, there's nothing wrong, but maybe then that is also one thing. I mean, nobody's going to kill. And that's also not going to say, okay, you are not hired. But it's good to understand what you can expect from the student. So that clarity is very important.
But I can comment that that problem is not restricted to students. If you try hiring directors, you have the same.
It's a cultural issue.
It's a cultural
So it's
issue.
all
I mean,
mindset, I mean,
yeah,
of course, yeah.
So we have quite a few students here. Do you have any questions? It's a good opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you for the good discussion.
You can just introduce yourself before you ask.
I'm Harpreet Kaur from IIT Bombay Department of Chemistry, and I'm also a joint PhD student at Monash University, Australia. So just in relation to the last question that you said, that Indian students do lack a bit knowledge on documentation, and I think yes, that's true, because I do have a little bit experience from both the universities, and I do get to write a lot of risk assessments before doing any experiments or doing any instrumentation, or if you have to order any chemical, you have to be very particular about the SDS and the protocols or the scheduled poisons to be ordered. So that protocols can be improved, I think, in the academia of India, where students can be guided to do that in their daily practices, which might improve things. But my question is in relation to the last discussions that we had. So I wanted to ask, like, what is the difference in the mindsets of industries in India as compared to Western countries? Because I see that in every lab in Western countries, you can find like one or two students who are industry sponsored, but we do not see that a lot in India. So one of the point that Professor Mahesh did point out that industry in India, people think that they are slow in academia, which could be true as compared to the durations of PhDs in India and abroad. But what can be improved, and what is your viewpoint on this thing?
To add to that, we do get a lot of calls now, right, from Dean R&D. Mahesh, you want to answer?
Okay. Right. First of all, the duration of PhD for average chemists and physicists in the US is somewhere around 6 years. Okay. So, and that is probably close to what we have here in chemistry also, not very different. So, we are not very different from the Americans, I can tell you that much. Engineers is slightly less, average duration is around 4.5 to 5 years. So that way. So what is the other?
Why don't we have industry-sponsored students?
So we do have now. There are companies who have come forward. I know that Asian Paints or not Asian Paints. I forget the one which makes Fevicol.
Yeah, Pidilite.
Pidilite. So Pidilite had sponsored some masters thing that is there. Some of the industries are also now sponsoring PhD positions in the department. I'm just not able to recall.
Aspen did some.
Aspen did that.
Yeah.
So Aspen was there. Hindustan, BASF has done it very recently in chemical engineering. Unilever has not done because there were talks that were going on with them. But there are few. I will not say that in every lab you will have. Maybe in a department you may have 2 to 3 students. What we do have, on the other hand, are employees of companies who are PhD students. So what they do is they spend 1 semester doing all their courses, and then they continue their PhD at their site. And so they will, of course, have a primary advisor here in IIT Bombay, and they have a co-advisor from the industry side. So that is very common. In chemical engineering, there are 200 plus PhD students. I think 20% would be similar students. So these are all, so they are not industry sponsored, but they are industry PhDs. They come here, do 1 semester, and then continue their project at their site.
So I've heard of your collaborations with academia. So how has your experience been? Both in the West also there are some collaborations, it seems.
Yeah, we sort of collaborate around the world. So we are geography agnostic. Largely, academic collaborations have been very satisfying. Frankly, it's one of the reasons of our growth over the years. We see, however, so in the West, when you define a project, sort of it moves with a timeline. It's a little bit more professional. In the Indian academic circle, I would not say again it's not a uniform thing, but it would depend then on the quality of the institution and the professor. But I would like to answer one more comment to her question. And maybe it's a question to the academics. When you start a PhD project, on day one, when the project definition happens, do you try to get an industry on board on day zero on what the project is? So I'll also explain my question. So what happens at the end of this 5 years? The student gets a PhD, the thesis gets defended. But is there a pipeline now to commercialize, which is also backed by the industry who started the project? So I'll be very happy to understand your views on this.
Yeah, so there are typically 2 types of problems I can say that our colleagues will work. One would be very fundamental, and there's no industry that would be interested in sponsoring them. So it would be some very deep kind of a thing, like fluid mechanics. There could be some aspect of flow that is not being solved. It's a long-standing problem, and the student might do a theoretical work long few years, 3-4 years, or do numerical simulation. But what happens during the course of that is the student becomes extremely strong in analytical thinking, is very good in solving problems, mathematics, in computation, and so on. And the hope the advisor has is that when a company interviews this particular student, they realize that this person has been actually trained how to think on a completely new problem which is unsolved. Okay. The second type of one is what you just said, where we may not have an industry on day one, but very quickly, maybe within a year or so, the student is working on a very applied problem, and the faculty would then try and reach out and write proposals, such as I just mentioned, try and get a collaboration from a company so that they can go forward. But they will try and align the project so that they know the student wants to go into the industry so that it's very application based. So there are these two. In the former one, you may say that the student is probably targeting academia and that's why the student is gone. But our hope is that even if the person does not land up in academia but goes for an industry job, the industry would appreciate the fact that this person has thought, worked on a very deep problem, and therefore if you give the person some other problem, the person will be able to quickly pick it up and solve it. That's the way.
Yeah, on that, perhaps you are expecting too much from industry.
Yeah.
So so we have maybe 5 minutes left, and any other questions?
I had a comment.
Yeah.
This is my favorite story, which I think you all know probably. It's about Google. The way Google started, the founders of Google were PhD students in Stanford. I think it's electrical engineering or computer science, I don't know. And they were given a problem to work on, and this is to do the search. At that time, I think there was only one company. Yahoo was there. I think that was the only company that used to have a search engine. And they came up with this page rank algorithm. And that came out of a completely an intellectual activity. How can you do a better search given that there are so many websites to reach wherever you want to reach? And it was a mathematical solution. But then, of course, they went on to establish their company, and that's also a very interesting story. They started this company, and you should read about it. They struggled for 2 years, and I think around somewhere the second year they even decided to sell it off. And they went to Yahoo and said that we want to sell this company. Would you buy it? Yahoo looked at it, and this is what surprises me. Is they said, okay, we'll pay you some. I think it was $200,000 or something for the company. They said, no, we think it should be 1 million. And what surprises me is that you would think that a company like Yahoo, which was already into search engines, would know the value of this new PageRank algorithm. Right? These are the experts. And Yahoo's problem was that when you do a search, it takes you to a different website. The Google search would take you to the web. And so they said, how can I do my advertising? Because I want the user to be coming back to Yahoo to see my website and so on. And of course, rest is history, as you know. And so there are various aspects. Bob Langer's project, Moderna came out of Bob Langer, MIT professor, I think he's a chemical engineer. Right? Moderna is right from his lab. And many other companies that have come out are from Bob Langer's lab. They all start with very fundamental thing, but then they are also very good to quickly see the financial value or to see an application of the kind of things that they are doing. I think we in academia have a lot to learn from such work that they are doing. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, any question?
In fact, I have a question for students. Anybody planning a startup? It can be just a dream or just a thought also.
Yeah, this is Kushal resume. You spoke about the industry academic collaborative programs. How do you handle IP in this case? Because IP is something which is most interesting for pharma company.
That is true. Yeah. So IP is always a sticky thing there. The industry says we are paying, so we should own the IP. Academia says when we are not just paying, there is years and years of experience and understanding and knowledge that is coming. You can't just go and pay somewhere else and get the same kind of expertise. So we should share the IP. And in my case, I know at least with one international company, we went through this back and forth for close to 1.5 years and just stopped. Then after that, he said it's better not to do that. So we have to find a way out. Typically, the industry would want to completely own the IP. Universities would say, let's share it. But that is a tricky phase, and that has to be negotiated. With every company, it's different.
It's not about the paperwork what we agree on. It's just because like somebody is coming to industrial side, they are seeing the things. On paper, they don't own the IP, but they have seen everything. They can go to some other industry and they can just replicate the same thing. So, would you think there could be like a hesitation for the industry to let some student coming in see what?
Is this for the internship, or are we talking about a collaboration where the industry?
But anything like any academic student coming to their lab for certain small duration of time.
Oh, that we have not had a problem. What I had in mind is when industry comes and says that, can you work on this particular problem? We'll say yes. And then there's always a clause, okay, if something new comes out of this, that IP, who owns that intellectual property? That's the question. And that's where, everything just goes around that. And the paperwork can sometimes quickly convert, sometimes, as I said, never converges. So that is there. The other thing is about internships. So when internships happen and the student goes to a company and works, then there's a very clear thing because the IIT per se is not doing anything. In such cases, as far as I know, the intellectual property is owned by the company because the student is located there, working with them on their problem, and therefore the IP would be owned by the company. That is the typical.
So I have a related question. Is there no global standardization on how academic institutions share IP?
No.
Maybe it's an opportunity to collaborate across institutions. I mean, because something like so basic as this should have a format which is beyond discussion and wasting 1.5 years of discussion.
Well, let me tell you, the story is the same in the US. Where the place where I did my postdoc, I'm told that it was sponsored by industry. The boss then in the university said that this project almost didn't happen because the university's legal team and the company's legal team went on for 1.5 years before they finally came. So it's a global phenomenon. And the company that I talked about, they are a US company who first approached the US universities, and when that didn't happen, they came here and the same thing. Because they always wanted to own completely the IP. So some companies are fine with it. They say, so what some companies say is that this is our area of business, and if we apply this knowledge to this area of business, then we will own the IP. Everything else, you own the IP. So that's one way to get out of this.
Again, let us thank our panel members, Dr. Kedia, Dr. Bachav, and Dr. Mahesh. And probably we'll be ready for the next session in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, we'll have postal presentation and
Okay, so yeah, so
Thank you.